answer to the question, what is the Arctic? Is the Arctic oil and gas reserve, or is the Arctic a climate refrigerator, conditioner better, or is the Arctic the territory where very creative people live with great human capacities are most important than oil and gas. So let's think also about this. Thank you.
Спасибо большое. That was very interesting reflections from your perspective, and went well in line with the previous speaker's reflection that was talking a lot about governance, and now add in the third part that was a bit missing here, the local authorities that might lead to new decision making, not only new language, new knowledge from the work, but that's maybe another step further. And the emerging key insight, it's with Sarah Cornell from the Stockholm Resilience Center.
Hey. My first insight is quite simply that when you need multiple ways of expressing or representing or communicating an issue or an idea, you should use multiple ways of expressing and representing and communicating the idea. So thank you everybody for bringing lots of different ways of doing that to the surface for us in this workshop. A second one is something that I think we're aware of in our chapter, and that's the issue of power. We know about our responsibility in compiling the report, but I think we need to make sure that that ethical reflection on what we do is brought into the light in the process of writing it, and also that we make it clear to the readers that we've taken that kind of concern in our writing. The third issue that I want to raise is actually to echo Doug Clark's comment from earlier, that we're very aware that much of what we're doing is new in terms of the regional approach and in terms of the concepts that we're bringing together, and to some extent in the mode of working, but nothing is new. We've got building blocks of knowledge already, we're building on existing networks, and again, to steal Bruce's comment from the wall, we're bringing very old insights to this process, and we need to bear in mind that we're making one small...
Thank you very much also to keeping the time, excellent, and also to very clear presentation of the insights where new and old go hand in hand. It was much clearer than your note page looks like. And then the last presentation, 3 minutes here, is overall, and this is a challenging one because I only saw Bruce this afternoon, but he's going to reflect over overall reflections on workshop results in relation to current understanding of resilience in the Arctic. So, 3 minutes.
Thanks. So I'm just coming, and I'm going to actually say 3 points, 2 of which have been mentioned by our speakers and in the follow-up comments, and again here, as he mentioned, it probably already was the language of resilience. In the report, this is alluded to, resilience is a concept with multiple meanings to different groups, but I would also lay out the challenge that more fundamentally a translation of resilience concepts in different languages is we can't assume that resilience thinking is a part of everyday life within a given institution or society or community, or what Gary said, the household, his preferred unit of analysis. That's one. The other about institutions, this was raised in Gary's talk, and then from Annette Luff's follow-up comment, and then the Sami woman and grandmother who spoke after Annette about the power of it. This cannot be underestimated. That it came up that institutions, either external or external, depending on their structure, can be slow variables or whatever you want to call them. We have to deal with those, and would put a line under that. The last is human agency. Again, this was mentioned in Gary's talk, and to put it shortly, people do things collectively or individually. They don't necessarily wait for a law to be passed. They are doing them all the time. And I didn't see that mentioned in the report, so I wanted to bring it out here. We have to pay attention to that, and Gary mentioned it in his talk, so I'll stop there. Old insights.
Thank you very much. Time limits at 3 minutes each, and I probably spoke 10 minutes altogether. So with this, I would like to first of all thank for the introductory remarks from the plenary, and give the mic to Johan to chair the debate.
Thank you very much. Why don't we give them an applause? So, you know. I think that was excellent. I can hear the microphone is working. So my name is Johan Kylenstierna. I haven't maybe said hello to everyone. I work at the Stockholm Environment Institute as well. I get very excited normally when I moderate, because, and in particular when it's such fantastic questions. But I will try to speak slowly, which is not normally my strength. So I will try to be slow. I looked a little bit. We have a lot of very good messages there. Many things came up also when the panel now presented their things. A couple of reflections also from my own side. Complexity comes back a lot. This is very complex, and I pick up also what you are saying, that we have to interact with, for instance, local decision makers. We have to interact with the governance system, and I assume we have to be careful about sometimes also being a bit too complex, or at least look at the capacity to translate complexity to possible decision making. Complexity of microphones is quite high here. So that's one aspect as well. We also could see that we need to move, that's also one of the points, from knowledge to learn. Particularly in the academic community, we stress knowledge, of course. That's very important. Learning is the next step. And I would argue that equally important is also doing. You know, how do you apply knowledge in reality? Old insights came up as well. It was probably your piece of paper. And one other aspect which I also find interesting is the interaction between short-term and long-term changes. That was also mentioned among the notes there. Different drivers, but, you know, partly, but also then interacting sometimes. And sometimes short-term drivers can pose problems, in particular for long-term sustainability as well. Power came up here, also in the... and also that we need to look at how the assessment can actually facilitate practical progress on the ground. I think that is challenging. We produce a lot of assessments. The question is, of course, how can we move this forward to practical change? We're going to have a discussion here. You're going to be invited again to provide additional insights. Maybe some things have come up after also the panel have presented their perspectives, given that they were given 3 minutes each. They have a lot of other things on their mind. They will have a chance, of course, to comment on some of the points that are coming up. I know some of you. But we would also like to ask you a little bit, after spending 2 days together, what you believe a resilience perspective could add to the challenges we have been discussing here. What is different from other assessment methodologies that this could add, and also how we can learn from the process, of course. So I will invite you to provide insights on some of these questions. And keep in mind now, this is the last sort of half hour of opportunities. So be quite specific. You have a chance now to influence the process. So be quite specific what you believe must be there in order to make sure that this is an assessment, not just another document that looks good on the shelf of an academic scholar. Johan, if I could just ask you first maybe a question, and I'm not going to do that, so don't worry, I'm not going to ask, But Johan, I like to put him on the spot. Because you started off, you were part of the opening, and you presented very convincing, of course, that the thinking of resilience can really be helpful in the kind of decision-making or management that we are looking at in this particular region, to address many of the complex issues we have here. Now, we spent 2 days discussing many of them, really practically, by the case of this particular region as part of the Arctic and the challenges you have here. Yeah, but, this resilience, how can that help us? What would be your sort of take after these 2 days? How do you believe that this particular approach could actually facilitate progress in this region to adapt and to progress in a positive way, considering the many drivers and challenges that the region is facing right now?
Thanks, Johan. Well, in a way, in fact, I think the panel in your summary highlights some of the key issues that I'd like to then raise. I think that the number one issue is, so what is resilience not? I think, in a way, that's often an easier way to explain what resilience is. And I think we can all agree that the current reindeer herding system or any social ecological system that we are concerned with in the Arctic is based on an assumption of stability. And it's based on the assumption, therefore, that efficiency, optimization, and kind of predictable policies to sort of say get the maximum productivity or the maximum economic benefit or the maximum social return on the short term is sort of say the rational way of moving. Now, a resilience lens does exactly what Svein pointed out here in the panel. It simply turns the whole coin around and says, look here, it's about managing under uncertainty, and it's about understanding that surprise is normality. So it's kind of truly, we've learned over the past 2 days that this is inherently inbuilt already in the indigenous knowledge of how you manage this environment. So in a way, the kind of reindeer systems in this part of the Arctic is kind of a step ahead of the curve and not locked in so much in the kind of efficiency, stability, optimization-based governance system that we see everywhere in the world. So I just want to re-emphasize the fact that a resilience lens starts off with the understanding that we need to manage for uncertainty, and we need to manage in ways that internalize surprise as one key feature of the management system. And if you do that, then you need to do an integrated, started with the analysis in any resilience assessment of what are the drivers of change. And the beauty of linking formal and informal knowledge and taking this kind of integrated approach with people like us in this room representing many different disciplines and knowledge areas is that we do try to cover everything from ecosystems to climate to governance to legal issues to behavioral issues, culture, etc. So to do this is in an integrated way. And I think bottom line is really that. But then it's true that we then try to formalize that a little bit in a framework to say that resilience consists of 3 components. It's really, in its heart, the ability to take a disturbance, to be smashed in the face while remain standing. I mean, that's the persistency part of price shock or a climatic event. But more interestingly, it's about measuring and analyzing what are the sources for adaptive capacity, and if you are pushed all the way to a crisis, how do you transform? But of course, these are quite theoretical concepts. The question is, how do you actually take them down to the ground? But I think we've covered a lot of ground these 2 days to say, I mean, just those 5 minutes today on brainstorming around sources of resilience, I think was one of the most rich dialogues I've had ever on kind of looking for sources of resilience. I mean, I think again, we are quite ahead of the curve. And then finally, just to say that, as I tried to mention before lunch, I think there's a difference for us in this assessment between the analysis of risks to the systems and the analysis of is really how do we take this insight and try to influence governance at the higher level, as Annette pointed out, that much of the pressures on the system is really policy decisions taken elsewhere. And how do you influence that governance level to understand that redundancy in grazing lands is an absolute inherent part of the resilience of the reindeer herding system. So you don't push the systems too close to the brittle point of tipping points. And then finally, just my final remark is that unfortunately, we need to do exactly again what Svein pointed out, to recognize that the reindeer herding system, or any system is now an embedded part of a globalized reality. So the driving forces are now coming from totally different scales than the scale of focus. And so often we forget cross-scale dynamics in a globalized world. So in that sense, it provides kind of a lens for looking at surprise and uncertainty. Simple as that.
So thank you very much. So simple as that. Any reaction from the panel on this? Do you fully agree? That's a contradiction in terms, at least in academic circles normally, but it would be interesting if this kind of perspective is also challenged, but not challenged just for the sake of it, but also if you can add an insight how then we in this particular assessment what we could bring in as an addition to make it even more relevant. Anything from the panel or the audience? We are now part of the same team here. So it's not panel versus audience.
Well, Johan mentioned climate as one of several drivers, but in reading through the latest draft and the way up here, I was seeing several climate examples, and I was gonna caution that we have to keep reminding ourselves to be much broader than that. The climate conversation is one that's going on, but we heard about the institutions, we heard about other drivers that are going on internally and externally, and we have to keep our eye on multiple balls in the air that climate change adaptation will be exacerbated by dysfunctional institutions that were there before climate change became an issue and haven't gone away. Example, and we know, and those adaptations will be made more difficult. Climate change adaptation will be made more difficult if we don't deal with the underlying lack of interface, I would say, between the policymakers and life on the ground.
If I could just ask a quick follow-up question, but could climate change then actually trigger positive governance changes as one positive example?
Yes, but after Gary, Doug's point was about, do we need to wait until disaster? Do we have to wait to a big icing event that takes out 50% of the reindeer, the cohort of calves in 1 year, and somebody go end up the supplemental feeding or something? But we should be more proactive and not wait until the disaster hits. And I think that was one of Doug's points. He had the picture of the Titanic up there, but he said that did lead to changes.
So climate change is a bit too gradual. It's actually better if we had a catastrophe, a climate catastrophe.
I mean, that's actually my point. I mean, this is Arctic Council. Don't forget about that, you know. I mean, Arctic Resilience Report are reporting to the ministers and the PPs of Arctic Council. And I think that's important. We don't need to experience a shock or a disaster before the Arctic Council. So they're probably reacting, they're waking up. But then I'm worried that when the Arctic Council members go home to the national states again, do they really care about making resilience environmental governance? I'm worried that they won't do that, you know. And so this boils down to something very important. I think that's Arctic leadership. And we have to take that seriously and start immediately, Annika, on the training of future Arctic leaders. We have to build resilience immediately, because I think, but will Norway accept this report and change the management of reindeer husbandry because of Stockholm Resilience Center's all effort and hard work? I hope they will. But we have some challenges of the leadership.
And what you know, and that's fine, and we're good at identifying challenges. So we now have been asked to do this report. What would be critical for that report to achieve the change, or at least go in that direction to try to achieve the change you are talking about? What do we need to consider in order to be successful?
I think Bruce said it in his, I think originally, that when we are communicating the message, we have to understand, we have to, and yes, we invited all the management system in Norway to this way. I can't see any of them. Not the municipality, not the reindeer administration, not the Minister of Environment, not the Minister of Agriculture. All of them were properly invited. You know, so there is a point. How do we communicate this issue? Because I believe there is no other solution. But the strength is, this is not an independent group. This is Arctic Council, and all national states have to follow the recommendation of Arctic Council step by step.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a good point. Who is the target audience is. We shouldn't forget that. Annika, you have a point here, and then we have one up there. Don't be afraid to introduce new areas. Chaos is the mother of creativity.
Make sure the receiver is on the same page, I think, is one of those critical elements. And part of getting on the same page, I think, is to find simple language that captures the complexity. A simple picture that has the richness that we need, that doesn't need an academic degree, that is just intuitive or becomes intuitive, because then it becomes part of one's obvious logic than making decision. And I think it's not an easy feat to do that, but I think that could be one important step towards actually having implementation.
Studies doing exactly this. Is that the main purpose, that the case studies should actually, you know, visualize the problem, but also some of the opportunities?
I think the case studies can provide us with a variety of examples of how we can express and visualize. And when we have a variety of examples on how to do it, then we can develop it further together to also get a common language and a common simple understanding of the complexity. Because it's also that common understanding that can move things forward, because if we have different simple understandings, we aren't going to move forward at all.
Okay, thank you. That's case studies authors, that they keep this in mind, that they have this function. So please.
I
I want to raise a critical point that is close to my heart and that I have been trying to pursue also in my role as one of the convening lead authors for formulating the ARR methodology. 2 points. First, I think a key strength, and yesterday I tried to emphasize that, of a resilience assessment is the cross-scale interactions or the consideration of cross-scale interactions. I want to bring it up again today because my observation from the work that we did over the last day is I'm humbled by and how well it is set up to be resilient. But I think my observation is that it is resilient to variability rather than to the directional change we know is coming. And it is actually, it might well not produce resilience in light of what is the new reality for more than climate change. Global drivers taking on land use, impinging on land, impinging on resources that are critical for keeping the cedar resilient. So I think, in summarizing that, I would say the ball there, time is running out. We have to definitely be as concrete as we can in working to the strength of the resilience assessment methodology, considering cross-scale interactions and making them policy relevant. I think that is a key point, and one that I think can only be pursued, as Tatjana said, together with multiple layers of governance. And if I have a conclusion from the last days, then I think we should strengthen that component of the ARR going into the next 3 years.
Just if I can ask a quick follow-up question on your comment, because as you said, we have many times highlighted CEO management in a way. And you are saying that maybe it's not enough. Do you believe an assessment should be a bit provocative in actually also assessing what has been, at least previously, successful management strategies from the light what you're saying here?
Yes, I would agree. I would not be the one who would be judging on CEDA. I don't know enough about it, but it was an observation that I think it has a role. It is a great achievement, but there is more that is needed in this globally connected world. And this is the place to show it and show a way forward on how to keep, to foster, etc., the resilience of existing governance systems. But it can. There was one case study, the one by Martin Robards, that actually explicitly addressed that, and I think we should seek more of those.
Thank you very much. We have a question or a comment or an observation here, and then we have one there as well, so please.
Thank you, Johan. It's a reflection, actually, from the discussion, interesting discussion going on. And one thing that I pick up on, relating to the previous comment and a lot of the points you guys brought up as well, is this whole sort of discursive dimension, that trickling, not always being made explicit, is the role of images of goals, strategies, and ideas. And by trying to make that perhaps more explicit, also, I'll speak slower, resilience for whom, to what, that can also be part to sort of uncover some of the power dimensions. What are the actual goals that we want to manage for, in which is a desirable direction, and that could sort of be presented as a provocative question perhaps to the Arctic Council, and forcing them to take a stand in order to sort of enlighten some of the power dynamics that is a reality for these issues. So I would encourage you to think more actively and not only implicitly about images, values, perceptions of people at all levels. What are the strategies of the reindeer herders? But also, what are the strategies and the goals of the policymakers? Do they actually need to know where you're going with your governing? And I think that's a key point in making explicit at all levels. So that was my reflection.
Thank you very much. Before we take that next point, Johan, was this a comment on this particular one, or it's a new? Before maybe doing that, can I ask if the panel want to reflect on any of these 2 points that are made before we sort of take another dimension in as well? I will always give you a chance. No? The panel is just absorbing the wisdom of the audience. That's perfect. So let's, yes, please.
And the trick is, if you can't speak slowly, have a pause between the sentences.
Yes.
I will try. Report, I think it's critical that we make some clear recommendations for next steps that flow from this. I agree with all of the suggestions put forward so far around the plain English understanding. The report should make them care about these issues, to understand that resilience thinking is a way of solving problems. But what concrete steps can they take next that is doable and achievable, maybe a short-term, a medium-term, and a long-term view? I think that's a recommendation. And secondly, my perspective on the issue here around reindeer herding. I've had a lot of experience in my life sorting out land use issues, and to me, what we're looking at here is a land use issue on a traditional land use from new and more modern, evolving land uses. So I guess my recommendation is that's an inevitable kind of trend that's probably not going to slow down. My recommendation for local Sami and to maintain is to identify quite clearly on the land what resources they need for calving, for connectivity between foraging and calving places. What aspects of the land base do they need for good years, for normal years, and for abnormal years, to make a very clear sort of spatial analysis of that in order to participate at a land use table and be very clear about what it is they actually need. They have to try and find that.
Okay, thank you very much. Good and specific. Before we take, Johan, I wait a little bit with you. We have a question back or a comment. But wait, one second just. It was a very specific question about, provide recommendations also to the Arctic Council. And I think this goes back a little bit to the mandate that is given to us in producing the report. So I was going to take the question, but maybe you, Annika, or Johan, maybe you, Annika, could at least explain what that mandate is. Is it to provide just policy-relevant insights, or can the resilience report actually provide very specific recommendations or different case? Please.
Thank you. In fact, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about. I suggest a couple of thoughts. Experience with these kinds of enterprises, in my view, demand that we think really hard about what a few key findings are, written in plain English or plain Norwegian or however, that is understandable outside of our community. It's a very tough job. In the most recent global energy assessment, it took us 6 months to all agree among the players what those words would be, and that they were a number less than 10. I think with this, if you had something like 5 to 8 key findings, would be outstanding, and they'll get read, they'll get dealt with, and they won't be set aside. The second thing about the word recommendations, the Arctic Council has a problem with that word. And I would urge you to transform it into options for action. It's a whole different turn on the phrase, and they will listen to options for action, but they will probably be, they just don't like recommendations. Thank you very much.
That's a very good point. Coming from the UN system in the past, I also liked, it's very important what you call things. You can write the same thing, but you have to call them something different. Maybe, Annika, can you just give us...
I think coming with recommendations, especially if you call them policy recommendations, because then it is in the purview of the policy makers to negotiate. However, I think there is something different in the process here compared to some of the scientific assessments. And that is that we're actually thinking of, and that was also brought up in the panel, how do we make the 1 + 1 + 1 = 5 and involve the policymakers into the assessment, not at the very end after we deliver the product. And that is not an easy balancing act. Process we do it, but I actually think we should do it. And that's my personal opinion. It's something we haven't discussed at length, but at least we need to think very carefully of how that can be done in a way that doesn't lock the discussion into a policy negotiations where people have already made up their mind, because then we won't go anywhere.
Okay, that's very good, Annika, and it's good that it's brought up very early in the process, because it does influence how we work and what we are actually asking people to do. Time is running. Anders, Johan, you have a comment as well, a very short one there, and Anders.
Well, first of all, I think many interesting perspectives from the panel and the audience as well. As much as I've enjoyed these 2 days, I'd like to perhaps take a different perspective. I mean, okay, so now big change is coming, and well, what do? We have an assessment, a report, which is fine. But after we've done this, and when I say we, I think of the Arctic, are we then ready just to go ahead? I mean, there's been 2 reports to the Arctic Council on sustainable reindeer husbandry. Did that for reindeer herding peoples? I think we could stand that question. On the other hand, on the more positive side, I would say that being introduced to resilient thinking and these concepts, it does ring many bells that seem very familiar to us. It is a concept that seems to be quite integrated, or more integrated with our line of thinking. So I'm actually an optimist based on that. But still, there is a challenge that we need to secure that these concepts are applied properly later on. Because even though we had these 2 in the Arctic Council, still what you see is that, take Norway as an example, how do you follow up sustainability? Well, on one dimension only. You have to think of this holistically. The one dimension is ecological sustainability. Forget the sustainability of culture or society and economic sustainability. So there's a even though these 2 days have been very interesting, very good, we also have to remember that there's a step from here
to a time when we actually can do something, should I say, significant in that we all, the reindeer herders of course, but anyone that are whose societies are in need of resilience because of change.
Thank you. I think that was a very good insight to the discussion. Can we keep the two remaining comments very short, Johan? And you wanted to keep them very short?
Okay. Well, unfortunately, I wanted to share one of the things that I myself, as the chair of the program steering committee, kind of struggling with. And let me just then put in the back of your mind, you know, the question was raised, how do we really have impact? And I think Bob Carell put it very clearly that we need to come up with a couple of quite powerful final recommendations. And I'm struggling with the fact that the kind of complex conceptual framework and the broad analysis we're doing, we're kind of almost hiding and shedding away ourselves from the core kernel, which is, do we or don't we have a problem? And the problem must be, are any of the communities, any of the key societies in the Arctic threatened by disastrous, abrupt change? And you know, if the answer to that is even close to yes, then I think this assessment must put that on the table. And that is a way of communicating. That's a way of addressing Anders' point. How do we get action? Mm-hmm. How do we address Svein's point this morning? That, you know, if we're heading towards, if we're undermining ecosystems, and if we moreover have a 50-year period of gradual social loss of resilience because of political decision-making, what does that add up to? Does that add up to a threat, yes or no, to a kind of an abrupt change which would be unacceptable? That is resilience assessment. That's the first order analysis of a resilience assessment. The second order analysis is to say, what are the sources of resilience, and how do you build resilience so you can transform yourself in the desired future? But the first order assessment is, do we or don't we have a problem? And if these 2 days land in the conclusion that we do have a problem, then we need to feel confident as a science-based assessment that we're communicating something that truly is a representation of the concern. So, you know, it would be important for us in the project steering committee to get a signal from particularly the representatives from the local knowledge here. Do we or don't we have a problem? And in that case, we need to have the confidence. I'm just reading one of the inputs to our meeting this afternoon. Unless there's dramatic changes in the near future, the Sami culture will die, disappear in my lifetime. This is from one of the key stakeholders representing indigenous peoples on the Arctic Council. I mean, I don't want us to stop on this note, but I mean, I just wanted to be clear that Bob's presentation yesterday was not a kind of an exaggeration of what's happening in the Arctic. It's really a very dramatic process. And I'm, just as Anders, absolutely convinced that if we understand the problem, we can also continue and not have impact on the Arctic Council. So somehow we need to communicate that. And that's the 1 + 1 + 1 becomes 5, because we're not only diagnosing the problems, we're also looking at the solutions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Johan. Very good points. I wish we had actually 1 more hour, but we have one final point there, and then I hope you bear to stay 5-10 minutes. It's a snowstorm out there. You can't leave the building anyway.
Thank you. I'll try and be maybe a little more positive, but we're talking about the Arctic entering the global world, and I would suggest for the assessment that you look beyond the Arctic. And what I'd like to bring to your attention is that in 2011, indigenous and community biodiversity was recognized and brought into the Convention on Biological Diversity. There's a new governance form that's been recognized and it's called Indigenous and Community Conserved Areas. There are, in Australia, the government turns over money so that Aboriginal groups on their lands can manage protected areas independent of government. In Colombia, I believe there's a national park that is managed by indigenous people. In Belize, I know of at least one case where a national, there are cases to justify that. And I don't know of any in the Arctic. I was just part of a review for IUCN in which we looked at Canada to see if there's any legislation supporting ICCAs, Indigenous Community, and we found none, although there are cases where there are Indigenous people that continue to manage their areas, but without any government support or legal recognition of that. So there's cases around the world for Indigenous management of areas. I think those could be brought out in the assessment as an example. If you want to have recognized that Indigenous people have been doing this for thousands of years and they can continue to do it well.
Okay, thank you very much. And also considering the timeline for this assessment, all these good ideas, we expect to really get the support, so we get, text in writing that we can use in the assessment. It would be great. Some of these are probably existing quite easily, hopefully. So any sort of final comment also from any of the panel members? Tatjana, you had a point you would like to make, or?
To Johan, yes, we have a problem. It's a clear problem. But to turn a little bit around, I think some years back. So, for example, Association for World Reindeer Herders were established in Yamal in 1997. And since then, something strange happened between reindeer herders and reindeer herders communities from Chukotka, Yakutia, Mongolia, Yamal, Nenets, Kula, and here. Actually, without knowing about it, Johan, we have been building resilience in those communities. We have to continue to do that. We have a problem, yes, but we also have achieved a lot because of the global cooperation between the reindeer herders. And I believe in that. And Johan Rockstem said it at the pub yesterday. Travel to Kautokeino and learn about social ecological systems. Yes, and discuss it and experience it yourself, And by doing that, follow the idea of Association of World Reindeer Herders, I'm very optimistic for the future. We have a problem, but I think we are going to solve it together in the Arctic Council.
Thank you very much. That's good. Of course we're going to solve it. I mean, otherwise we would not sit here. It would be useless. So any other points? Yes, Bruce, I was actually going to allow you, since you've been driving from Rovaniemi, to be here only this afternoon,
Just a quick comment to follow up on Bob's point and Anders, and that is where, again, this gap between, what was it, policy, or in policy speak, actionable items. I think I'm an optimist too, and the other thing is to look at the trend from where Arctic Council started and where it is now. The profile and attention paid to this is only increasing, and that part of that is the current changes that are going on. So I think this conversation needs to continue, and we need to continue to be optimistic, because when policies change, it's because the stars line up, and the stars are starting to align, and the attention on Arctic is aligning. So I think we just have to keep, I agree, the two sustainable reports were great. Nothing really happened, but we are 10 years later now, and we are in a better position.
I think that's a good point. We could compare, south has been the front yard, and normally in the backyard you put all your trash, and, in the front yard you plant all beautiful flowers. Now the Arctic is in the front yard, suddenly. That is a positive development.
Flowers.
Yes, exactly. Now we want the flowers. So, it is, as you say, you point out, it's a positive development, just the increasing attention, partly driven by, of course, the fact that people want natural resources and so on. And hopefully some actions also, based on policy-relevant ideas. To thank you also. I don't know if you want to say, because you are the formal chair of this session.
Exactly, I was going to thank you for contribution and panel, and thank you everybody, and hand over to Annika.
I want to thank everyone who has come, but there are also some people who need a very special thanks. And first of all, our interpreters. Silva and Sara Maret, so many thanks to you for the work you have done. And we have had a lot of fun. It's been a great pleasure working with you. Ravna, please stand up if you're here. Please stand up. Ella, Svein, Anders. This would not have been possible without having you here and welcoming us so warmly here. We also have a technical group that's been helping us making this work in terms of getting things on screen, making sound and those things. Christopher, I don't know if any of them are in the room. Even if they're not in the room, great thanks to you. And our video camera, Haldur, constantly making sure that the knowledge and learning we're doing does not disappear out in thin air. We carry it with us, but also people who aren't here are going to be able to take part of it. And also, I want to thank Katarina at SEI, who has helped me so much with just about everything. Please stand up, Katarina. So I'm humbled and very happy by the experience here these past couple of days. At 5 o'clock, there will be a bus to Jules Silver Gallery. That will later bring the members of the project steering committee back here because we're going to continue working this evening. So if you want to go to the Silver Gallery, you can come there and you will be back in time for the meeting. I don't know if there are any practical issues for tomorrow. The bus leaves at 10. So we should have everything with us.
Yeah, you can bring it to the bus.
Everyone heard that? And with that, that's the end of this workshop, but I think it's just the beginning of a long dialogue and discussion and friendship. Thank you very much.